Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, and welcome to Cast of All Trades. I'm your host, Orion Siebert, and in this episode, I'm talking to you busy folks, the people who are juggling school, 2 jobs, family life, and contributing to the community, the people who just don't seem to have enough time in the day to do whatever matters to them. I'm talking to you. In this episode, I'll go over my 5-ish part framework that will help you start developing the skills you want to learn while balancing all the troubles of life. First, I'll go over the framework, then walk you through 2 example plans that you could use as case studies as you figure out what you're going to learn and how you're going to learn it. Part 1 is selecting the right skills. Before we can even get started with actually going out and learning something, you have to be able to choose the right thing to learn. So that's where we're going to start, of course. There are a couple key features of this we want to go into to figure out what's the right skill going to be for me. A couple of things that you might want to keep in mind are, 1, perhaps choosing something that has low startup requirements, whether that be a low capital requirements that you don't have to put a bunch of money into, perhaps something that you can do over shorter periods of time that you might have more time or a greater ability to easily get started with. You might want to look at choosing a skill that's scalable, something that if you learn how to do it a little bit, you can have a larger, more outsized impact with doing that thing. Think of it as a upfront investment for a larger long-term gain. A good example of this might be learning how to do copywriting, or email copywriting in particular. It's going to take you the same amount of time to write an email for one person as it would to write an email for 50 million people in the long run. So that's something I would consider to be a scalable skill. Another option is to look at something that tries to get you more time back, where perhaps the thing that you're trying to do isn't necessarily scalable, but it's a skill that you can use to ultimately give you more time to go and do other things. Think of it as like learning a professional skill that you can then use to go get a new job that might have shorter hours or might pay better, and that would allow you to go out and do more of the things that you love, ultimately earning your time back. But there are a couple other key ideas behind this that are really important. One is to choose to do one thing at a time. Sure, you can choose a skill that... a key part of this is that you can choose a skill that has many sub-skills within it, but it's important to remember that you can only really learn one aspect at a time. You can only really improve one part at a time. And trying to do a shotgun method in this case isn't going to be the most efficient. And right now, since we're talking about busy people trying to do new and important things, efficiency is kind of the name of the game. So focus on doing one thing at a time wherever possible. Beyond that, it's important to figure out why. Why is this the skill that you want to do? There's a couple different quotes that I could mention, sort of go into about this, but there's one that always strikes my head when I think about why do we do something. And it's a quote from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and the quote is, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." And while this quote may seem a little extreme for what we're going for, trying to learn new skills, if you have a strong why for the thing that you're trying to do, that's going to help you overcome most hardships that you're going to run into while you're trying to develop this skill. Learning new skills always has a difficult learning curve. Some learning curves are easier than others, sure, but you're always going to run into some sort of trouble along the way. Things never go perfectly. But if you have a strong why for why you're learning to do this thing, or have just a good enough why that can get you to overcome some of these hurdles, that's going to help you so much. So choose a skill and know why you're doing that skill. Even if it's just a hobby skill and you think to yourself, I think this would be super cool, and perhaps there are some other benefits along the way that are more personal to you. So long as you have a strong why or know exactly why you want to do this skill, that's going to help you so much in the long run when you inevitably run into barriers or hurdles that you have to overcome. And another part of why, of a different psychological principle, if you will, that helps you stay motivated to do something, and that is the concepts of fear and motivation of why you want to do this thing. When choosing a skill, I find that having something to run from, i.e. a fear, and something to run towards, i.e. a motivation, can be very strong at I don't want to use the word motivators because motivation is in part of the definition and that's not something you're supposed to do, but you get the idea. Where if you have something to run from and something to run towards, that's going to be much stronger than if you had just one of those individually, where if you only had something that you're trying to run from, or a fear you're trying to escape, or something to run towards, a shining light that says, that's the life I want. By having both of these things in mind, and often they're the exact opposite of each other, you're able to have a much stronger dedication to the skill you want to learn. A very general example of this would be for someone trying to learn a new professional skill that is going to hopefully get them a new job. What is their fear? Their fear is being stuck in a current job that they hate for the rest of their life, that they'll never be able to change, and they'll be stuck doing this one thing that maybe it's not bad, but it's not what they really want. So that's the fear that's pushing them. And the motivation is going and getting a new job, something that appeals to them much more, something that gives them more free time or more money or more of something that's desirable to them. Fear and motivation, they work hand in hand and often they're the opposite of each other. So it's not too difficult to look into this, but if you can write out clearly what your fear and motivation is for learning this skill, that can help you much more in the long run and goes right alongside your why. Second is setting realistic goals and finish lines. Once you have your skill selected, it's important to know what is going to be good enough. When am I going to be quote-unquote finish with this thing? You have to really start with the end in mind for this because, like I said, you're busy. We have to be clear with what we're doing. What's the actual goal of this? Because with that, we can be much more efficient with how we target and try to accomplish said goals. So, set the end goal and start working backwards. I'm reminded of a quote from Alice in Wonderland, a segment where Alice is talking with the Cheshire Cat. I'll go back and forth a little bit as I go through this segment. First, Alice, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? In response, the cat says, that depends a good deal on where it is you want to get to. Alice, I don't much care where. The cat, then doesn't much matter which way you go. So, with that in mind, if you don't have an exact goal or something exactly that you want to get to, then it's going to be very hard to set a track or find a track that you can follow to get there. So that's the main point that I wanted to get across with starting with the end in mind. So what is that end that you're going to start getting to? There are a couple different ideas or things that you could do to get there. I find that professional goals or professional skills tend to be a bit easier to set a goal and work backwards from. Oftentimes you can find a course and have a certification as the end goal, something you could put on a resume. Another option could be to say, I want to be able to do this thing to this standard where I can feel satisfied with it. It's very vague, very general, I know, but that's sort of the point of going through this framework, and then later when we get to the actual examples, we'll get a bit more in depth with it. But part of setting these realistic goals and finish lines is also setting performance metrics and accomplishments. Now, it's important to keep in mind that for setting your performance metrics and accomplishments, there are some things that are within your control and some things that aren't within your control, and that's going to depend on what sort of skill you're doing. For example, in your control is how much time you put into doing a thing, each month, each day, each week, whatever your time frame is. That's a direct performance metric that you can control, so that's a good goal to have, something that's directly in your control. You can also have some goals that are not necessarily within your control, but might be byproducts of things that are within your control. A good example of this might be someone who is starting a YouTube channel. Their performance metric is that they post an episode every single week for 5 weeks. That's their performance metric goals, where they can directly influence the outcome of it, where their input is directly correlated with the output. Perhaps the accomplishment side of the goal, then, is to get X number of subscribers. You can't directly control that. It's a result of you putting in effort, but you might not get that exact end goal that you want for a certain amount of time. Say you have a time frame on it. I know I'm getting a little vague with this now, but in essence, you have to learn to separate what's within your control and what's outside of your control. It's important to have goals for both, as often the goals outside of your control are your North Star or the guiding principle, or more behind the why of what you're doing, while the goals that are within your control, those are the steps that you're going to take along the way that help you ultimately get to that out of your control goal. So Let's go with that. Great. You have a set of goals now. Take some time to figure out exactly what they are. Once you do, then we can move on to part 3. That is the planning and research phase. And this I am the most in-depth and particular with for this framework, because there's a lot that you can learn about research and a lot you can learn about planning. But something I'm going to say up front is you want to set a time limit on your research time and on your planning time, because if you don't, I know way too many people who have said, I'm going to go and do X, and then they go watch a couple YouTube videos or go pick up a bunch of books they're going to read, and they say, I'm going to start after I finish reading this book. Then they finish reading that book, who knows how many weeks or months later, because they don't dedicate time to doing it. They read that book, and they think to themselves, awesome, I read that book. Now I want to read another book about this same exact topic. Then I'll start after I read that book, or after I watch another video, or after I listen to another podcast, or always another, pushing back the goal, or pushing back the start time. So before you even start doing your research, you want to set a time limit on how much time you are going to spend researching, and have time set aside and dedicated upfront for doing your research. So keeping that in mind, what are we going to do? Well, we said it already a bunch in the realistic goals and finish line section. You want to work backwards from the end goal, and there's a couple things to keep in mind with this. One is, what are the core competencies that you're going to need in order to accomplish the goal that you set for yourself? Find the 80-20 of it. I'll go a bit more in depth with this with the case study examples later, but oftentimes when you're trying to accomplish a goal, you don't need to learn absolutely everything about the thing you want to do in order to get most of the way there. And oftentimes people get stuck in the weeds trying to figure something out that actually isn't that important, or they're not actually going to use much in the long run. So figure out your core competencies of what's actually going to move the needle the most here. Next is you're going to want to figure out your methods and your tools for accomplishing the goal. This might be finding specific software, specific programs that you can use to do something online, or it might be going out and buying a few things that you have to have in order to actually practice your skill. For example, if you want to learn guitar, you have to have a guitar. So it's kind of simple as that. But it's also figuring out your learning methods. That could be picking up some follow-along books that you're going to go off of. It could be finding some YouTube courses or online courses. If you're doing self-study, then perhaps you make a plan yourself of, this are the things that I'm going to do based on some of the tips I found online. Really, it's figuring out what are you actually going to be doing during the time you'll set aside for practicing this new skill of yours. And ultimately, you're going to run into problems as you do this. That's fine, because you're probably not going to spot everything up front. You're going to make a plan, you think to yourself, yeah, that's a great plan. And then later down the line, you're going to keep on following it, and eventually that plan isn't going to be sufficient for what you want to do, most likely. And that's fine. Expect that to happen. It happened with basically every single one of my projects that I've done all my life. So what do you do then? Then you go back to doing research, and research only what is necessary for as little time as possible. Find and look into the exact problem you're having, or if you're just not making progress whatsoever, great. Go back, start fresh, and figure out, okay, I know that the thing that I was doing wasn't working. I can check that off the list. What's another option that I have available to me? And start over, start from there. So that's the key ideas behind the research and planning phase. Do whatever it takes to get you ready to actually accomplish the goal, to accomplish whatever goal you're set for yourself. But be careful that you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis or the eternal research phase where you're just watching video after video, reading book after book, getting those dopamine hits and feeling good about yourself because, oh yeah, I'm learning about the thing that I really want to go and do, but you never actually go and do it. Most people are, in reality, too afraid to go and start something because it's hard to explain entirely, but people don't like to be wrong. They don't like to fall short. They don't like to fail. And the risk of failure or the fear of failing for themselves is often too much for them to even risk starting at all. But then they'll think about that thing for years and years to come, and they'll think to themselves, what if I actually tried? What if I'd stopped watching those videos and actually gone and tried something? Because ultimately, it's what you do that matters. It's what you do that counts. I'm going to hit that point again later, but yeah. Research to an extent, then move forward into the next phase, which is sort of related to the planning and research phase, but this is the time management and implementation. And I don't know if I've said this before on this podcast, but I hate the term time management because you can't manage your time. Everyone has 24 hours in a day, and you cannot manage or change that in any way, shape, or form. What you do have is priority management. You have the ability to decide what is going to be my number 1 priority, my number 2 priority, my number 3 priority. You may not explicitly say that, but your actions in your day-to-day life are determined by your priorities, or the priorities that other people set for you, because if you don't set your own priorities, you're going to be doing and following other people's priorities they have for you. So up front, you have to decide for yourself, where does this skill place in my priority tier list, in my priority list whatsoever? Is it going to be like my number 1, where I get up first thing in the morning and that's the first thing that I do? Great. Is it going to be number 2, 3, 4, 5? It better not get too low on that priority list, because if it gets too low, you're not going to do the thing. This often means you're going to have to sacrifice something. And trust me when I say most people have something they can sacrifice very easily. Perhaps not easily, but something that will be worthwhile to sacrifice, such as their social media time, or the time they spend on their phone or on their computer that's for entertainment or for decompressing or relaxing. Because believe it or not, going out and practicing a skill instead of sitting down on the couch and binge watching Netflix for hours, one, you're going to feel much better about it because you're developing some self-confidence. You're learning a new thing. You're doing something cool. Perhaps you make some mistakes, but you're progressing towards something. And that sense of progression, it feels amazing. Honestly, there's nothing like it. You could do that, or you could sit on the couch and doom scroll your way through Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever your poison of choice is. It's all a matter of priorities. So first things first is you have to decide how much of a priority are you going to make this. And once you decide that, then next is figuring out your consistency. When are you going to work on this thing? How much time do you have allotted to working on it? And what really matters here is consistency. It has to be within a few days of each other usually. Preferably, you want to work on this every day, but I personally like to do things like 5-6 days a week for most skills that I'm developing. But if I'm really into it, then I'll gladly do it every day. But try to have some time set aside every single day to do something. It doesn't have to be a lot. Obviously, the more the better, but it doesn't have to be a lot. You probably have 5, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, like 30 minutes in a day. It's doable for most people, realistically. Just cut out some of that social media time, cut out some of that TV watching time, cut out some of that lazy time where you're just sort of throwing time to the wind, because time is a resource you're never going to get back. I'm not saying that you cannot relax, that you cannot have a chill day and do nothing. Of course, I have those as well. But you have to have some priorities here. You have to set aside specific amounts of time to go and work on this thing. So, looking at that, what are some other ways that you can help optimize the implementation and priority management of being able to do the thing? There are 2 key things in mind. Well, maybe 3. And the main idea here is, how can you lower the activation energy so you can start quicker? And there are a couple different ideas behind this. One is to set things up ahead of time, where if you have something just laying out, it's much easier to approach than if you pack it up every day, and then before you can start, you have to unpack everything, prepare a few things, and then by the time you have everything set up, it's already been quite a time commitment, and you've cut into the actual learning time. So if you can have things set up ahead of time, that would be great. Whether that means cleaning up your desk at the end of the night so that when you sit down first thing in the morning, you can just open up your laptop, open up your computer, start typing away, and instantly be into it. Or, if you don't have things set up, you can waste a bunch of time cleaning off your desk or preparing a couple notes or doing some things ahead of time, and that's ultimately cutting into your writing time if that's the thing you're working on. Continuing this idea of writing, another thing you can do is to have open loops or to leave open loops when you're working on something. Now, this won't work with every skill, but with a number of skills where you're actively creating something, this can be very powerful. The idea here is you're abusing a psychological principle where your brain likes to forget closed loops. It doesn't think about things that are done and finished. So we're going to continue this writing example to explain this. Say you're working on your first novel, and you're nearing the end of your first day of work, and it was a rough first day. It was a little hard to get started because, the white page is very daunting for writers or painters or artists of any kind. You get to that last sentence, you know exactly how you want to finish it. Don't finish it. Whatever you do, don't finish that sentence. Leave it open-ended. Get about halfway through the sentence and stop right there. Don't you dare finish that sentence, because what that's going to do is it's going to leave an open loop in your brain. You're going to constantly be thinking about it in the back of your head. You're going to be thinking, oh yeah, I have this awesome sentence I'm going to use. I'm going to keep it going. And that book idea, that writing, is going to stay in your head for a while. Then when you open up your computer the next morning and keep going, guess what? You don't have to think about what am I going to do next. You already know what you're going to do next. You're going to finish that sentence, and by the time you do, you're going to probably know or have a good idea of, oh, I know what I'm going to write next. And you're going to keep going. Oftentimes, starting something is the hardest. I know for me personally, sitting down and doing the first 2 to 3 minutes of podcast notes or trying to prepare for one of these podcast episodes, God, those first 2 to 3 minutes are hard to get through. But I know that if I get through those first 2 to 3 minutes, I love it. I'm having a blast and I can go for hours on end. It's great. So that's me taking advantage of open loops. If I can leave some of my podcast notes open or some of my research open where I say, I know exactly what I'm going to do when I sit down in the morning or when I sit down to work on this thing, great. I can sit down, dive straight into it, and I can almost bypass those first 2 to 3 minutes of hell and get straight to the, oh yeah, this feels great, this feels awesome. So, those are a few key things to keep in mind with your time management and implementation. I feel like I was going to say one more, but honestly I've kind of forgotten, so we're just going to brush past that and move on. Finally, part 5 of the framework is not necessarily a part, but it's an important thing to keep in mind as you're trying to learn this new skill. Part 5 is to keep going. Just do the thing. That's really what matters most. What matters most is what you actually do. You're not going to make any progress if you never actually do anything. This is coming back to the idea of people getting stuck in the research phase, where they keep on watching videos, they keep on reading books, they keep on just putting off the act of actually starting and the act of actually doing the thing. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind here, and I'm just going to read something to you that I try to remind myself every day. So every morning, I read a little thing to myself to remind myself of these are the goals that I'm focused on this year, here's what I'm doing with them, and then at the very end, I have something that is a little extra, it's a confidence booster of sorts, or it's a good kick in the butt to say, remember this, just do it. So every morning, this is part of what I read. Quote, in the end, it's what you do that counts, so try your best, forgive yourself when you make mistakes, learn from them, and try again. The only way to fail is if you quit. So long as you don't quit, you can't fail. So, keeping that in mind, what does that mean for you? It means that don't beat yourself up over maybe missing a day or two. Okay, you missed a day or two. Does that mean that you're going to quit? That the rest of the effort that you put in for the days, weeks, or months before has been put to waste? No, absolutely not. Dust yourself off, get up, and get back to it. But if you never get back to it, that's when you really fail. The only way for you to fail is if you quit doing the thing. You may fall short at times, you may make mistakes, but really, what does that mean? It means that you're learning. If you're learning something new, of course you're going to make mistakes. Of course you're going to fall short every once in a while. That's fine. Deal with it. Keep going. Brush yourself off. Learn from the mistakes. Figure out why did I skip these past 2 days? Did something get in the way? Did I make it, or did I not make the thing a priority? Correct course and keep going. It's as simple as that. Now, it's difficult to do in practice, I know. I know that I've definitely had my hard times of it's taken a few days that, I just sort of slacked off these past few days, and it's hard to get back into it. But if you can make a set of rules for yourself, if you can decide, I'm going to do this thing, it helps so much. A good example of this is from me this morning. I woke up late, and I didn't want to get out of bed. But as part of my 6 goals for the year, part of it is I want to be more consistent with my exercise. I want to develop a certain kind of figure. And as part of that, I decided that I would work out 5 days a week with pretty intense exercise. Do I always do some intense exercise? No, not always, but I always do some sort of exercise. I always do something 5 days a week. I exercised Sunday, Monday, and then I skipped Tuesday, so that leaves Wednesday, Thursday, today's Friday, and I like to take Saturdays off. So what does that mean? That meant that, even though I woke up late, if I want to keep up with my schedule, if I'm going to make this a priority, that means that I have to work out at some point today. I usually work out first thing in the morning, but woke up late, kind of slothed around for a bit, and I kept telling myself, I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. But then I reminded myself, you committed to 5 days a week. You like to take Saturdays off. You already took 1 day off this week. So that means you gotta do it today. And you know what? Partway through the day, I finally said, okay, dang it, I gotta do this. So I went and did the thing, and I felt so good afterwards. Sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you fail, sometimes you fall short. Okay, great. Get up, brush yourself off, learn from your mistakes, try again, keep going. Great. Now with all that said, let's go over the 2 case study examples I have. One is going to be a hobby skill, and the other is going to be a professional skill. They're going to be slightly different in how the case studies performed and how we actually go through this process, but you'll see there's some similarities to it, and hopefully, by listening to these case studies, you'll be able to figure out for yourself how to create a plan for your own skills and how you as a busy person can go about learning the skills of your choice. So, let's start with the hobby skill. Let's go with something like learning how to play the guitar. So, selecting the right skills. First up, learning to play the guitar. That's going to be a hobby skill, and perhaps my why is I want to learn how to play a specific song for my fiance's birthday party or something like that. I don't know, but let's go with that. You want to learn how to play a specific song on the guitar for your fiance's birthday. Great, that's a pretty good why. You have a timeline, you have a deadline. That's an extra strong motivator to say, I want to do this thing. Your fear is, I don't want to flub up during the celebration, or I don't want to be late with it. Your motivation is, God, how beautiful would her smile be when she sees that I learned this song just for her. So there you go. Let's go with that. So skill has been chosen, you have a strong motivator, you have a strong fear, you have a why to do the thing. Next, setting realistic goals and finish lines. Let's say that you have 2-3 months to go and learn this song. Okay, great. There's your timeline. Your realistic goal is, I want to learn how to play this one song that she really likes on the guitar. Let's say that it's not super fancy, that it's a pretty common pop song. Let's go with that. Keeping that in mind, we have a finish line, we have a goal. What can we do from there? Well, we can set some basic metrics that we can go by to say, am I putting in the effort to get to this end goal? Some basic metrics would be, how much effort am I putting in? What's my timeline going to be? How many days a week am I going to be doing this thing? Now that's already starting to dip our toes a bit into the time management and implementation side. It's good to keep in mind now. Let's say you'll do 20 minutes of practice every single day for 5 days a week, because that's what you can commit to. Great. You have a timeline, you have a set of actions, a set of inputs that you can control. Awesome. Moving on to the planning and research phase. Now, I'm not actually going to go out and do a bunch of research on learning how to play a specific song on the guitar, but modeling out, this is what it would roughly look like. So let's go back through this. So setting time limits on your research time. Let's say that this guy is going to set aside maybe 2 days for research to figure out let's go find some sheet music, to go find a couple basic tutorials on how to learn the guitar, to go and maybe pick up a guitar for him to learn how to play with. Okay, that'll take about 2 days. Now, working backwards from the end goal, he can figure out, okay, based on my end goal of learning this piece, what do I need to know to play this specific piece? He's probably going to find some guitar tabs where he can figure out, this is the 80-20 of it. I need to learn these 3 to 5 chords because they're played all throughout the piece. If I can learn how to play these 3 to 5 chords, I'm golden. I have like 90% of the piece done. Awesome, that's your 80-20 of it. If you don't need to learn every single chord on the guitar to learn how to play a piece, don't learn every single chord on the guitar. If you're just trying to learn how to play one piece for a specific thing, then learn what you need to know to play that one piece well. So there you go. That's your 80-20 of it. Tools and methods. Let's say this guy is a big YouTube nerd. So he'll go onto YouTube and find a couple tutorials on guitar warm-up exercises, getting used to playing the guitar, a couple different fingering things to help him out with getting those chords, and a couple strumming techniques. But he's mostly learning from YouTube videos. Finds a few, makes a playlist, calls it good. There you go. That's his tools and methods. And then also prints off some sheet music. That'll be his last method, like a guitar tabs sheet. Let's go with that. That's our planning and research phase done. Even with me not going through and actively doing it, you can see it doesn't take as long as you might think. Now, the time management and implementation side of things. We already briefly touched on this with the metrics-based goals of this guy wants to dedicate 20 minutes a day for 5 days a week. He's going to dedicate 20 minutes in the day, first thing in the morning, like before he heads off to work. He has a bit of time to do that. Awesome. Maybe he gets up a little early to make sure that he can do that. There we go. So how is he going to be able to actually be consistent with it and just do it? He's going to set things up ahead of time. Perhaps he leaves his guitar sitting out in the living room, and he has the guitar tuner always sitting at the end of the guitar. So first thing in the morning when he leaves his room and comes down to the living room or tries to go to the kitchen, he'll see the guitar there. It has the guitar tuner already hitched up to the end, the head side of the guitar, so he can quickly tune it. He already has, maybe he already has a tablet pulled up there that you can quickly open up and go to the tutorial of the day. You can go through that, play along with it. 20 minutes later, he's done the thing. First thing in the morning, taken care of, knocked out of the park. Check that off the list. Maybe he even has a little calendar next to it, so he can just check it off every single day that he does it. I find that could be an extra good motivator to help keep you going. And yeah, let's go with that. So he's able to do that. He makes it easy to start up every single day. That's his time management and implementation. He gave up a bit of time in the morning, maybe gave up a little bit of sleep, to be able to go and learn how to do this thing. Now it's just a matter of him going to keep going. Maybe he has a rough night and he's wakes up the next morning hungover a bit, and he doesn't have that usual time that he usually practices with. Well, maybe he gives up a little bit of time later that evening, or stays up a little later to practice, just to make sure he gets in the work every single day. You gotta put in the reps. So, finally, time comes to his fiance's birthday party. The time comes for him to present his song. He does a pretty good job of it. He's satisfied. That's a rough case study of how someone might put together a plan for a hobby skill like playing the guitar or some other hobby skill you might do. Next, let's go through it again with doing a professional skill. Let's use learning how to do Microsoft Excel, for example, so you can get a new job in something with data, I don't know, but learning how to use Microsoft Excel to a more proficient level. Okay, let's go back to the top. So selecting the right skills, finding your why, all that stuff. Microsoft Excel. Perhaps you're trying to get a new job that will give you a higher paycheck and will be less strenuous on you. Perhaps something that you can do remotely. There you go. You get a bit more time or get a bit more freedom back. That's part of it. But really, your why is that you don't like the job you're currently in. You want to go get a new job. The fear is the job that you're currently at, it kind of sucks. You want to do something else, and you don't want this job to be your life. The motivation is, well, if I can get a job with my new Excel skills that's perhaps remote or pays better, then I don't have to live where I live, and I can go somewhere far away and do my job in a much happier place. There we go. fear and motivation quickly ticked off the list. Next is setting realistic goals and finish lines. Like I said previously, professional skills can actually be a bit easier to figure out what your end goal is going to be. In this case, there are a number of Excel certifications that you can get. One of the most popular is the LinkedIn Learning Excel certification, I'm pretty sure. So let's go with that. That's the end goal. This person wants to get a LinkedIn Excel certification. Great. Now, what's going to be their personal performance metrics and accomplishments? Their personal performance metrics might be putting in 30 minutes a day, or perhaps they can even talk to some coworkers or talk to their manager to say, hey, I want to learn how to do this new skill. I think it's going to benefit us at work if I have some time at work dedicated to learning how to do this thing. So they might even be able to get away with having some dedicated time at work to learning how to do this new thing. So yeah, be sure to look at your options before you just say, oh, I don't have time to do it, because employers could be very flexible if you're actively trying to improve yourself, and that if it can actually actively improve the company. So there's your natural inputs of what's the time, what's the effort I'm going to put in daily, and then what are some of the accomplishments or end goals I want out of this. Perhaps it's making an awesome presentation or an awesome project with your new Excel skills, something that you can show people to say, take a look at my portfolio. I can create these cool spreadsheets that do a lot of interesting stuff that'll be very helpful to your company or to whatever things you're up to. And to prove it even more, here's a certification that I got for doing this thing. Awesome. That's the end goal, that's the finish line, whatever you want to call it. Great. Let's go to the planning and research phase of how are we going to do this? And here's another perk of a lot of professional skills with certifications. A lot of these certifications have courses that go with them, and a lot of them have their own courses, their own curriculum, their own stuff that's already all in one big ecosystem. So the research phase is actually made much easier because it's mostly just a matter of deciding what course or what certification do you want for this skill. So yeah, honestly, it takes out a lot of the effort. Presumably, in those courses, they're already going to have your 80-20 built in, where it's going to teach you the most important skills or the most important things you need to know. Or if you want to just add on a little bit more from outside from outside the courses, from outside the certification stuff, you could do a bit more research to see what are the important things that you need to know how to do in Excel for this specific job or for this specific thing that you're going to be doing pretty frequently. Just go out and start delving in to see what are the few things that I want to learn and just make a little list. That's some of the benefits of professional skills. The research phase is often made much easier, surprisingly, especially if you're just learning how to do a piece of software or trying to get some sort of certification. Okay, next is moving into the time management and implementation phase. Again, this is a matter of figuring out when do I have time to do this thing. So, like I mentioned before, perhaps you could talk to your manager about this to see if you can do some learning on the job, to see if you can do this certification course on the job to perhaps get a pay raise or to go and do something else because you're learning this new skill for your work or for your career. Or if that doesn't work, then maybe you work on it a bit over your lunch break where you're just eating your lunch and you're plunking away numbers at Excel in this course. You spend 15 minutes there, you get a little bit of the way through the course, and then shut it down when you have to get back to work. Awesome, that can work. I know a lot of people who've learned stuff on their breaks at work. Fun fact, I used to study Japanese while I was at work on my breaks. Did I ever learn that much? Not really, but I wasn't all that consistent with it, and I was still just learning the basics. But when I was studying it, I was learning things, and it was good. Perhaps you stay late at work, or you show up early to go and do maybe 15 minutes to half an hour to just delve more into this Excel course that you're trying to learn. Great. And if you show up early or stay late, then it makes it easier for you to stay committed to doing the thing. Just build it into your schedule. And when it comes to lowering the activation energy to get started for this, let's say you just make a couple bookmarks on your computer where you have Excel just as a desktop shortcut so you can quickly open it up and it instantly drops you into your course curriculum. And you have the course bookmarked in your browser so you can quickly open it up and you're instantly back to where you were last time. Great, you just made it so much easier to start. You can start quickly and easily. Finally, once again, we're back to just keep going. Just keep doing the thing. Remember why you want to learn this new skill, keep in mind the end goal, and just keep going. Really, that's all there is to it. So, to recap all of this, in summary, if you're a busy person looking to develop your skills, do the following. 1. Choose the right skills to learn. 2. Set realistic goals and finish lines. 3. Set aside an amount of time to plan and research, and only use that allotted time. 4. Make it a priority and make it easy to pick up. Last but not least, 5. Keep going. I believe in you. Best in luck. You got this. If you enjoy this episode of Cast of All Trades, I have 3 super easy things I'd like you to do that would mean the world to me. 1. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. 2. While you're in your podcast app of choice, give the show a 5-star review. It helps us reach more people and in turn change lives through journalism. And 3. Share this episode with a friend or two, someone you think would gain a lot from the show. Word of mouth is the best way to help a podcast grow. And if your friend likes the show, they'll thank you for introducing them to it. It's a win-win. And with all that said, best of luck, tradesmen, and I'll talk to y'all later.